sorry. There's a huge catalogue of who work there.
Okay.
Yeah. Very, very, very good indeed. Helene says, I adored Chester. He was one of my baby MPs when I worked for John Key. Wonderful to have you both. Guy, Williams and Nadine, thank you very much for this afternoon. I'm Ross Chapman. I'll see you tomorrow, 3:45. Till then, cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere aki nei, thank you very much for your kind donation. The Prime Minister plans to hand the hat around on an epic scale to fund the cyclone recovery. There'll be a special Lotto draw too. A red stick at Homeowners in limbo because cliffs have caved in around her, but the house is okay, so the insurance company says there's no loss to claim for. Aotearoa's roads to nowhere. There's months of patch-ups and engineering gymnastics ahead to restore access to cut-off regions. Waka Kotahi is live. And Gloriavale's leader denies ruling like a dictator. Howard Temple tells the court his community doesn't have the cash to pay a minimum wage. You can watch us live on the RNZ website or Facebook.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Aiahi Mārie. Good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. The government has announced a special fundraising appeal to raise money to support recovery efforts from Cyclone Gabrielle. A separate special Lotto draw will also be held on March the 18th, with all proceeds going to affected communities. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
The initiative is modelled on a similar appeal after the Christchurch earthquakes, which raised almost $100 million. A charitable trust will oversee the efforts, with funding to go towards medium to long-term recovery projects. At a media conference earlier, the Prime Minister Chris Hipkins defended asking people to chip in during a cost of living crisis. He said it would be a channel for wealthy New Zealanders abroad to show their support. Donations can be made at cycloneappeal.govt.nz or over the counter at all trading banks.
A severe thunderstorm warning is in place over the same region of the Upper North Island that was hit by torrential rain and flash flooding last Friday. It covers Kaipara, Whangārei, Rodney and the surrounding areas. Met Service has also placed a severe thunderstorm watch over the Upper and Central North Island. The storm is reaching Puhoi, and resident Hayden Taylor says the thunderclaps are so loud the house rattled and it feels like the air is electrified.
It's quite bizarre. There's a thunderstorm coming across with lightning, but the sound of the thunder actually sounds like it's being funneled down a steel tube, and it's bizarre. It almost feels like the air's somewhat electrified.
Downpours are expected from the afternoon until about 9 o'clock this evening. Watches are also in place over Coromandel and the Eastern Bay of Plenty. Met Service says the front will weaken and move away from New Zealand on Tuesday. The Prime Minister, Chris Hipkins, has declined to express confidence in the chair of Health New Zealand, describing his recent comments as inappropriate. In a post online over the weekend, Rob Campbell criticised National's Three Waters policy as a thin disguise for dog whistling on co-governance. Under the Public Service Commission's Code of Conduct, directors of Crown entities are supposed to act in a politically impartial manner. Mr Hipkins says the comments fall well outside that.
I do think that his comments were inappropriate for someone holding a role such as the ones that he holds. That is ultimately now a matter that the ministers responsible will be raising with him, and of course there's a process that they need to work through in doing that.
Mr Campbell earlier told RNZ his comments were made as a private citizen. Census Day will go ahead on Tuesday the 7th of March with an extension for areas affected by Cyclone Gabrielle. Cabinet has agreed with the government statistician's recommendation to extend field operations in particularly hard-hit areas. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins says census work in Hawke's Bay, Northland and Tairāwhiti will only be done when it's safe to do so. The extension will run from the 6th of April to the 1st of June, with the National Census Day going ahead on the 7th of March. Gloriavale's overseeing shepherd has told the employment court that the Christian community can't afford to pay everyone the minimum wage. Howard Temple has been giving evidence in a case brought by 6 former Gloriavale women who are seeking a ruling they were employees rather than volunteers. He told the Chief Judge, Christina Ingalls, there's no simple answer to the question of how Gloriavale would manage paying everyone as employees.
I'm having a bit of a problem of just solving that. So for the top of the head at the present time. Yeah, I was going to say, you might have to give me the solution how all this would work, okay?
Or I might give you the solution.
Howard Temple earlier told the court he's saddened people have been harmed at Gloriavale and admitted leaders had made mistakes. And the demand for temporary accommodation following Cyclone Gabrielle is expected to rise in the regions as displaced families register for help. The government's temporary accommodation service has now been extended to cover all cyclone-hit regions. It's estimated that in Auckland alone, 1,800 households may need a temporary place to live. The manager for Response and Recovery, Julia Shanahan, says they've had a snapshot of housing needs, but it's not the full picture.
100 households that may need TAS support in Northland. In Tairāwhiti, our early estimates are again between about 100 and 400 households. And in the Hawke's Bay, initial estimates suggest about 560 households may need TAS support.
Julia Shanahan says no options for accommodation are off the table, including motels, hotels and even establishing temporary villages. To sport now, and Kane Williamson's long vigil at the crease has come to an end as the Black Caps continue to fight to save the second cricket test against England. A short time ago, the Black Caps were 456 for 6, a lead of 230 after being forced to follow on. Kane Williamson made 136, his 26th test century, and an innings that saw him become New Zealand's all-time leading test run scorer, surpassing Ross Taylor's total of 7,683. I'm sorry, I seem to be having a technical difficulty here. I will give you weather after this promo.
More rain again.
Look, it's still happening and there's more to come, unfortunately.
Flood damaged cars. Buyers beware.
Stick your head in the door and smell, and if you're getting a smell of old wet blankets combined with your brother's socks, do not go near it.
And National's new water policy. So who pays?
What's missing really is a clear steer on how the national model solves the funding and financing problem.
Nothing dry around here. Morning report weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And we are funded through New Zealand On Air. Just to finish off that sports news, Kane Williamson made 136, his 26th test century, and an innings that saw him become New Zealand's all-time leading test run scorer, surpassing Ross Taylor's total of 7,683 test runs. Tom Blundell is at the crease on 74, and he's been joined by Michael Bracewell. The All Black Sevens have won successive tournaments in World Series, beating Argentina 22-12 in a tense final in Los Angeles. New Zealand scored 4 tries to 2. The informed All Blacks finished their men's basketball World Cup qualifying campaign with a game against Lebanon and Wellington tonight. Fresh off a 47-point drubbing of Saudi Arabia in Christchurch on Friday, New Zealand are assured of a place at the World Cup in August. Forward Tohi Smith-Milner says coach Pero Cameron had instilled a sense of pride in playing for the Black Singlet.
Like a lot of us go away and play AMBL with Australian teams, the Breakers, and we kind of lose a bit of ourselves a little bit, but coming back into these camps is a great thing to be able to do.
Meanwhile, the Isle of Man have been dismissed for 10, the lowest score in men's T20 cricket history. That was against Spain, with 7 of the batters out for naught. The previous lowest score was Sydney Thunder's 15 in the Big Bash last year. Thank you for sticking with me through the swings and roundabouts of that bulletin. Now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. Northland, Auckland, Waikato and Waitomo. Fine breaks and scattered showers, some heavy with possible thunderstorms and downpours until tonight. Isolated Isolated showers tomorrow, clearing by the evening. For the central high country, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Periods of rain with some heavy falls, thunderstorms and downpours possible inland until tonight. Rain or showers for Gisborne and Hawke's Bay tomorrow, easing later. Isolated showers elsewhere, clearing tomorrow evening. From Taranaki to Wellington, also for Waded Upper, fine spells. Isolated showers mainly about the ranges, clearing later tomorrow. Thunderstorms and localised downpours possible for northern Manawatu and inland Whanganui today. For the South Island, fine spells, isolated showers about the ranges, some heavy with possible thunderstorms from Arthur's Pass northwards today. Mostly fine tomorrow, but isolated showers about the ranges during the afternoon and evening. And for Dekohu, Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy with a few light showers. It's 8 minutes past 5. I'll have news headlines and traffic for you at 20 past 5.
Ngā mihi, Evie, to use a sporting analogy, good save there, my friend. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki checkpoint e tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The government's crowdsourcing the Cyclone Recovery Bill. It's launched an international fundraising effort modelled on the Christchurch earthquake appeal, which raised almost $100 million. A separate special Lotto draw will also be held on March the 18th, with all proceeds going to affected communities. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins has urged New Zealanders to get behind the effort. He defended asking people to chip in when the cost of living is so high.
There are people abroad with very strong connections to New Zealand who want to be able to make a contribution, and they therefore want to be able to have a channel, a vehicle through which they can direct those. And that was certainly the case after Christchurch. So that includes expatriates who are doing well abroad and who want to give something back. This will be a vehicle through which they can do that. And it is an opportunity for people to make those kind of small micro donations to support their fellow Kiwis.
Donations can be made at cycloneappeal.gov.nz or over the counter at all trading banks. People can also text GIVE to 2454 to donate $3.
If you look at the appeal post the Christchurch earthquake and the sorts of things it was funding, it's often been used to fund some of those things that are of strong benefit to the whole community, but maybe fall outside of a particular area of focus for government or the private sector. So things like sporting facilities, community facilities, where previously fundraising may have built them in the first place. This is an opportunity for us to be able to give back.
Meanwhile, the national state of emergency has been extended and will continue in Tairāwhiti and Hawke's Bay. Other regions will soon transition into a recovery phase. A Muriwai homeowner claims she's in an insurance limbo after cliffs crashed down either side of her house during the cyclone, leaving her property red-stickered. Even though the house itself is untouched, it's too dangerous to live in. Jackie Schubert was forced to flee her home in the West Auckland beach settlement, grabbing just a few clothes and a bag of dog food on the way out. It's the same landslip that trapped and killed 2 firefighters just a few doors down. 2 weeks on, her house is still cordoned off due to unstable land, and any decision on its future could be months away. But right now, Jackie told me she's unable to access insurance payments or other financial assistance.
It's a difficult time. We're completely in limbo. So we're safe and we're warm and we've got a roof over our heads. But we just don't know what's coming next.
And I want to talk about that, but can we go back a little bit and tell us what happened to your property on the night and the slip?
Okay, so we didn't hear the slip. We got a loud message on our phones at 1:33 a.m. on Monday night, so Valentine's Day, so the 14th. And it just said, get out, get out, get out. Grab your pets, grab your grab bags and leave the property immediately and come to the surf club. So we did. We did have grab bags, which we hadn't thought very much about, but did them anyway. And then we grabbed our pets and 8 kilos of dog food for some reason, but that seemed to be the priority at that time. Then we got in the car and we ended up down by the surf club, but it was flooded and blocked. So we were guided by the police into a back area of the camping ground, and then we slid down a bank and jumped the little river that was surrounding the surf club and then spent the night in our wet clothes on the concrete floor at the surf club, which was very uncomfortable, I have to say.
And Jackie, when you next saw your property, what does the hillside look like so people can get an idea of what you're dealing with here?
Directly behind us is still covered in vegetation, but either side of us is just a clay escarpment, essentially. It's everything that was there, the macrocarpus, the native vegetation, everything's gone. It's, but that's not on our property. Our property is completely untouched.
Yet it is surrounded by this scarred earth and these unstable cliff faces.
Yes.
So has your house been assessed by the council? Does it have a sticker on it?
Yes, we're red stickered.
So, in simple terms, that means what?
We're not allowed to go back there under any circumstances, and we are in what they call the evacuation zone, so nobody around us is allowed to go back.
So, for all intents and purposes, your house is unlivable, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what has the insurance company told you?
Our insurance company has told us that to date we haven't suffered a loss, so we technically haven't suffered a loss, so we're not entitled to any kind of payouts. We have begun a payout, a claim for some frozen food that's in the freezer because they've acknowledged that the power was off for 3 days. But really that's it. And virtually everything we own is in that house, and we're just making do and going out and buying new things. We were let into the house for half an hour one day in the first 3 days after the cyclone, and we grabbed clothes and underwear, and I took some photos, and we grabbed passports, and yeah, that's about it. That's all the time we had.
So Jackie, just if we can pause there, because, beg your pardon, you have not suffered a loss. That's what they've said to you?
That's right.
And what do they exactly mean by that? You're unable to live in your house?
Well, you tell me. We just don't get it at all. We've lost nothing yet. Our house is completely intact. We're just not allowed near it. So until such time as we're told that they will demolish the house or another landslip comes down or something like that happens, our house is sitting there with 2 or 3 others completely in an untouched island in the middle of all of that chaos.
And so, how many other properties are destroyed or unlivable at the moment directly around you?
I only know of at least one. We can only see what we see on TV or from the drone footages and things like that. Most people, our neighbours up the back, they've got clay at the back of their house. It depends on what you would like your risk level to be, doesn't it? I mean, I do kind of agree that our house is completely unlivable because I wouldn't rest easy sleeping there, especially if there was more rain.
To be clear, Jackie, this is the slip that took 2 lives, yes?
Yes. It was 5 houses up from us. Maybe, 5 or 6 houses up from us. On the same side of the hill.
Could you sleep easy in your house if you had to?
No, absolutely not. We don't know what else is coming down. That cliff face that's been there has been covered in vegetation for, as long as any of my neighbours can remember. We've only lived there for 5 years, but our little beach house is probably 50 years old. The feijoa tree in the garden must be 60 years old. The nikau trees are hundreds of years old. Nothing like that has happened before.
And you didn't hear it at all? It came without warning?
We didn't hear a thing. We heard heavy rain, and then what woke us up was the blaring of the of the civil defence notifications that came through our cell phones.
So you right now are totally in limbo. Your house has got a red sticker on it. You're not allowed to live in it, but the insurance company says you haven't lost anything yet. So what do they need from you to prove that you have had a loss?
They're waiting on council, actually, and the geotechnical engineers to decide whether or not we'll ever be allowed to go back in there. And other agencies, there's absolutely nothing that we can do.
And do you know how long that will take, Jackie?
I don't know, but I suspect months. I mean, as I say, that escarpment behind us has been covered in vegetation for so very, very long. Now that it's just completely bare sand and clay, who knows? Will it bake and crack, or will it rain and slip? I don't know. If the area could be made safe, we'd be back there in a heartbeat. But as it is now, and as I feel at the moment, with the state of what I can look up from the back door and see, no, I don't want to live there.
And that was Jackie Schubert. And Checkpoint did ask AMI to clarify the situation, and they've got back to us with a statement. They say AMI discussed Mrs. Schubert's claim with her on Friday last week after she lodged a claim on Thursday. And we asked her if she required alternative accommodation. She stated that she did not. They go on to say that Mrs. Schubert also advised that she wanted to wait until access to the property is authorised so she could reassess if any additional claims were needed. AMI says it emailed Mrs. Schubert on Friday telling her they were glad to hear her and her family are safe and to contact them if she had any questions regarding her contents claim or if a house claim needed to be lodged at a later date. AMI says if anything has changed for Mrs. Schubert, we are standing by to assist her. It is 20 minutes after 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It will be at least a month until State Highway 1 to Northland is fully reopened. Waka Kotahi says its crews are working hard to get the road through to the Brynderwyns reopened as quickly as possible. But it says the ground is still moving above and below them, and Friday's rain pushed back progress. The closure is having major effects on those who need to travel to and from Northland, and our reporter Louise Tenuth joins us now live from Whangarei. Louise, what have people been telling you?
Well, Lisa, there's a lot of frustration here in Whangarei. Many Northlanders do rely on State Highway 1 as their vital link in and out of Auckland. Now, we've spoken to builders working in Warkworth who tell me they've added an extra 2 hours to their trip each day, and it's a similar story for those needing vital medical treatment in Auckland City. Now, they're pinning their hopes on a 4-lane expressway from here to Whangarei, but at the moment they're just desperate for State Highway 1 to open up in some shape or form for them.
And what about local leaders?
Yeah, so we've spoken to the local Mayor Vince Kokorulo, and he's estimated that the cost for Northland's road is going to be well over $129 million, especially with those recent slips near Waipu Cove. And he's asking for more government support and more contractors to be deployed to those slips near the Brynderwyns. But what he told us he's really concerned about is truck drivers that rely on State Highway 1 to get in and out of Auckland each day, and they're driving northbound because those delays with those detours in place are having a severe impact on them. Here's what he had to say.
In simple terms, when we start talking about costs and the costs for trucks and all that sort of things, it doesn't just deal with mileage or driver hours, but fuel and maintenance. So when they've done the calculations for the drivers to actually use the Paparo to Oakley Road, which is the road which a lot of trucks have been using, that costs on top of using the Brynderwyns $400 extra per travel. So that $400 has got to go somewhere. So either it's got to be passed on to the shops or it's got to be swallowed by the truck drivers. Now on top of that, there is time requirements. So the drivers have got certain times that they've got to be able to do the trips in. And if they go over their time, they get penalised. So what we need is a government to basically understand that the truck drivers and the trucks are under certain pressure, and they need to come to the party and help out them as well. It's affecting the tourism, it's affecting the businesses, the supermarkets, it's affecting everybody. So it's not just about one business, it's everybody.
So Lou, that's the Whangarei Mayor. What can you tell us about the detours that still remain?
Yeah, so State Highway 1 between Brindewin and Waipu remains closed. So for light vehicles, they need to detour via State Highway 12 through Paparoa and Oakley Road. But for heavier vehicles, which is your trucks, they need to detour via State Highway 12 and 14, which is through Dargaville. But what we're hearing on the ground is that truck drivers are actually using the Paparoa route because it's far quicker. But the road there is already extremely fragile in places. And so that's putting more pressure on the roads. And with more rain set to come, that's something that the local council is watching extremely closely. And we do understand, the local mayor has told me that he is expecting an update from Waka Kotahi on whether or not there might be a possibility to open up a single lane through the Brindewin sometime later this week, but that's yet to be confirmed. Once that information comes to hand, we'll keep you updated.
Thank you, Louise. That is Louise Tanous live from Whangarei. And after 6, we'll speak to Waka Kotahi. It is 23 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Tell us what you think about the government, handing the cap around for donations for the Cyclone Recovery Bill. Also interested to hear from you if your district is still cut off, if you've got problems with detours and roads which have been severely damaged in the floods recently. 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Evie's standing by with the headlines. Ko Evie anō tēnei.
Areas of the upper North Island are under a severe thunderstorm warning, days after being hit by torrential rain and flash flooding. The warning covers Kaipara, Whangarei, Rodney and surrounding areas. Met Service has also placed a severe thunderstorm watch over the upper and central North Island. Downpours are expected until about 9 o'clock this evening. Watches are also in place over Coromandel and the Eastern Bay of Plenty. The government's launched an international fundraising drive to support the Cyclone Gabrielle recovery. It's being modelled on the Christchurch earthquake appeal, which raised almost $100 million in 2011. A special Lotto draw will take place on March 18th. The national state of emergency has been extended and will continue in Tairāwhiti and Hawke's Bay. Other regions will soon transition into a recovery phase. 5 people remain unaccounted for, but police say they're likely avoiding authorities on purpose. Census Day will go ahead on Tuesday, the 7th of March, with an extension for areas affected by Cyclone Gabrielle. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins says census work in Hawke's Bay, Northland and Tairāwhiti will only be done when it's safe to do so, and Met Service says a tropical cyclone over Vanuatu is unlikely to hit New Zealand. Tropical Cyclone Judy was named by the Fiji Meteorological Service this afternoon. Met Service says it's increasingly confident that Judy will remain far to the northeast with minimal impact. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic. Because of high volumes of traffic, State Highway 2 is very congested between Miani Road and Omahu Road. Lots of wait times there. State Highway 35, due to heavy rainfall, the road closure on State Highway 35 has now been extended and is now in place between Tolaga Bay and Ruatoria. And at about 10 to 5 this afternoon on State Highway 1 at Longbush in Southland, a crash has closed the highway between Kennington Road and Longbush South Road, and there's a detour in place. Our next news and traffic is at 20 to 6.
Kia ora rā, Evie. New Zealand have scratched and clawed their way back into the contest against England at the Basin Reserve. Led by a century to former captain Kane Williamson, the Black Caps have carved out a lead of around 250 runs with more than a day's play left in the second test. I'm joined by sports reporter Daniel Gilhooly. Daniel, so can we win this? And by that, I mean the Black Caps.
Good point. Well, you can't actually rule it out, Lisa, which seems quite implausible when you consider how much England have dominated the series. We sort of saw Bazball in full flight for the first 1.5 tests, but the fight back over the last 2 days with the bat from New Zealand has been quite impressive. They barely fired a shot with the bat in the first test at Mount Maunganui, and it looked like deja vu when they had to follow on in this test as well. But yeah, it's now set up in quite an interesting place for the last day. England are still in the box seat, but the game will actually become very interesting soon because New Zealand will surely be looking to win rather than draw this game, and no matter how difficult that is to achieve. So they'll look to set it up on the last day. And it's going to become a test of Tim Southee's captaincy, namely just when is he prepared to ask England to chase a target? Might he even declare overnight? I've heard one colleague suggest that to me. I don't think he will. I think he'll go a little bit into tomorrow morning if the team does last that long and set England around 300 runs if they can. You can probably rest assured that whatever their target is, England will chase it. I mean, that's been their modus operandi on this trip. And their coach, Brendan McCullum, we know his mindset. And Captain Ben Stokes, they'll be desperate to make it 7 test wins in a row. They've got a real roll on. They'll want to keep it going. Interestingly, if New Zealand were to pull off victory in this game, and they'll need 10 wickets to do that, it'll be just the 4th time in Test history a team has won after being asked to follow on. So that'll be quite an achievement. If they do it, it could be in front of a pretty decent crowd tomorrow. New Zealand Cricket has just announced that there'll be free entry to the ground for all patrons throughout the day.
Wow. Okay, talk to us about Kane Williamson. You know, he'd looked well off the pace in this series up until now, and then boom.
Yes, he has. I think he'd only scored 10 runs in his first 3 innings. He looked down on confidence, and those questions were emerging again around him. You know, have we seen the best of Kane Williamson, particularly with some of the injuries that have impacted him in recent years? This one hasn't been a majestic knock from him, but it's been kind of quintessential Kane Williamson, really, barely taking a risk. It's sort of been complete contrast to the Bazball style that England have brought here. It's been head down and fight. He became New Zealand's top Test run scorer today, surpassing Ross Taylor. It was inevitable he would reach that point. But if you delve a little deeper into the world stats, it's interesting. Williamson is only ranked 35th for runs, which is a lot lower than a lot of people might expect. And really, it's a testament to how few tests New Zealand actually play compared to the big guns of the world game, your Indias, your Australias and England. Someone like Joe Root, who's playing in this series, the world-class England batter, Williamson's often compared to him. The pair started at a similar time to each other. In fact, Root started 2 years later and yet has somehow played 37 more tests than Kane Williamson. So he sits about 3,000 runs ahead of him on the list. While I'm just talking about this, a word, if I can, for Tom Blundell, the New Zealand wicketkeeper who's closing in on 100 himself at the moment. I'd have to say Blundell's a really bright point in this Test team. He's it's fair to say they've had their share of struggles of late, particularly with the bat. He's a wicketkeeper who's a genuine top 6 quality batsman, and it's probably fair to say there aren't too many of those around the globe at the moment. So he's really doing the business for the Black Caps.
Good to talk to you, Daniel. That's Daniel Gilhooly, a sports reporter there, talking about the Black Caps prospects. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins has refused to express confidence in the chair of Health New Zealand, describing his recent comments as inappropriate. In a post online over the weekend, Rob Campbell criticised National's 3 Waters policy as a thin disguise for dog whistling on co-governance. Under the Public Service Commission's Code of Conduct, directors of Crown entities are supposed to act in a politically impartial manner. And at a media conference earlier today, Mr Hipkins told reporters the comments fell well outside that.
I do think that his comments were inappropriate for someone holding a role such as the ones that he holds in terms of Crown Entity Chair. There is a code of conduct around political comment by people who hold those roles, and his comments fall well outside that. That is ultimately now a matter that the ministers responsible will be raising with him, and of course there's a process that they need to work through in doing that.
Our political editor Jane Patterson joins us now. Wow, Jane, what's going on?
Well, I think if you take those comments from the Prime Minister about Rob Campbell's comments, I think it's fair to say that his position is certainly not secure tonight. It is not only the comments that he made, but the nature of them, and particularly the fact that he made a personal comment about National Party leader Christopher Luxon in his LinkedIn post as well. Take that with the code of conduct that is pretty clear in terms of political impartiality for government-appointed boards, and also the response of Rob Campbell. He told RNZ that the comments were made as a private citizen. He said the comments are or is what it is, and he didn't believe they needed clarifying further. So it is before ministers now, but for the Prime Minister to come out so strongly and say specifically that his comments fall well outside that code of conduct do not bode well for Rob Campbell.
Comments made as a private citizen, Jane?
That's right. And coming back to that Public Service Commission...
Seriously, though, in that position?
Well, it's the Code of Conduct makes it very, very clear that even in a personal held view, and I'll quote, irrespective of our political interests, we conduct ourselves in a way that enables us to act effectively under current and future governments. We do not make political statements or engage in political activity. If you are a public servant or in a public service role, there is a very serious expectation of political neutrality. And that's basically so that if there's a change of government, the whole public service doesn't have to be turned over because they've been politicised. So the National and ACT Party is saying it appears to be a serious breach. They are calling for ministers to take it seriously, saying basically if Rob Campbell can get away with making this sort of comment, what kind of message does that send to the rest of the public service that actually the vast majority do take this very seriously?
And I suppose there has to be a difference between muttering something under your breath at a private function in your own lounge as opposed to putting it on some kind of social media platform or online platform.
That's right. And he posted it on LinkedIn, and it sparked quite a conversation. There was also another reference when someone challenged him about it in terms of the political neutrality. He said, I don't have political masters or mistresses. So he was pushing back on that in terms of having responsibilities under that political neutrality. So there are two ministers involved now, Aisha Verrill, Health Minister, in terms of his position at the New Zealand Health Authority, and also David Parker as the Environment Minister, as he's also head of the Environmental Protection Authority. Now, they will be taking, I'm sure, very strong note of the tone and direct comments that the Prime Minister made. They ultimately will make the decision whether Rob Campbell stays on. There's also the Public Service Commission involved as well. So things may move pretty quickly depending on what conclusions those ministers and the Public Service Commissioner come to.
Thanks for that, Jane. That's Jane Patterson, our political editor there. It is 26 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National, and it's time for the business news. Ko taku hoa e nai ko Nona Peltier. Nona joins me in the studio to talk business. Volume of retail sales fell in the last 3 months of 2022. Well, that's interesting because that would have been the Christmas shopping season, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's an interesting... That's an interesting piece of economic data for the industry to digest, as well as the Reserve Bank. So what we're talking about there is a drop in the volume of sales of hardware, which is interesting because you'd think with building supplies is another, and garden supplies is another one. So this is like, I guess, household spending, the kind of you would expect owner-occupiers to spend their money on. Well, they weren't spending their money. That was the biggest decline of 15%. And motor vehicles and parts industry down 10%. Interestingly, though, the hospitality and accommodation sector, it rose 28%. So overall, those are definitely mixed numbers. But they mean, well, I guess if you compare it to the year earlier in 2021, there weren't any tourists. So I suppose it's not a surprise that accommodation saw a big uplift. And with, I guess, the concern about spending, household spending, mortgage rates increasing, I suppose it's not a surprise that we've seen that part of the retail trade fall away. It's hard to say what's going to happen in this quarter, though.
Yeah, exactly, because you mentioned car parts and what have you. That's going to be a different kettle of fish after
as
the
well
floods.
As building supplies with all of the disaster. We're going to have to
Okay, well, let's
off.
move on to Genesis Energy. Brimming hydro lakes have helped the power company post a supercharged first half-year profit.
Yeah.
What did it make?
145.3 million net profit, and that's for the 6 months ended December versus 84.7 million the year before. Revenue was down a little bit, but overall, the company is making a lot of money off of hydro lakes, I guess, and not having to spend as much money on thermal generation, which is much more expensive. And that's because we've had a lot of water. Not surprising for anybody to understand. So that meant that their Northland hydro stations definitely were benefiting from that wet spring that we had. And I suppose with the wet summer, that's going to continue on for them.
Yeah. And tell us about your market numbers, please.
Okay, so the market was down nearly 1% today, and that's in line with what we've been seeing in Asia as well. So we dropped 112 points to 11,793. Interestingly, the New Zealand dollar, it's It's up slightly from where it started the week, but really way down on where it finished last week at 61.4 US cents. And that's, again, about the US dollar and the interest rate hikes that are potential there, 91.5 Australian and 51.4 British pence.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite. Nona Peltier there with Business News. Hawke's Bay hospitality businesses are pinning their hopes on the reopening of State Highway 5 to return trade to some semblance of normality after Cyclone Gabrielle. About 80% of tourism businesses are back up and running, but cancellations are still pouring in and visitors have all but disappeared from the streets of Hastings and Napier. Our reporter Robin Martin is in Hawke's Bay.
The procession of Defence Force Unimogs and emergency services vehicles has gone from Napier's Marine Parade, but so have the tourists, the lifeblood of so many businesses along the strip. Tanya Cowan is the director at the family-owned Motel des Mers.
At the moment, all of our bookings until the end of March have cancelled, apart from our corporate travellers who are slowly coming back as of this week. We've had cancellations up until the end of July from our internationals, and at this stage with no new ones coming in.
She says there's little clarity on what the government's $25 million package for businesses means for those not directly affected by the flooding.
I mean, obviously, financially, I'm just waiting to see what the government brings out as far as that's concerned. Our expenses are the same as what they were 2 weeks ago, but we've dropped from 97% occupancy to 20%.
Tanya Cohen says if the Napier-Taupo highway is reopened in time for Easter, there's no reason why the city can't bounce back. Owner-operator of Napier City Bike Hire and Tours, Jan Pavlicek, is also doing it tough. How many bikes have gone out this morning?
Zero. Zero, and Monday morning, the week is, say, not as busy as the weekends, but we'll still have a bunch of bikes out. So yeah, we will be fairly busy. Like I said, it's zero now. It's definitely, like last week, obviously nothing.
The immediate future looks no better.
We'll see how it's going to pick up, but in terms of forward bookings and cancellations, I'm not getting any bookings or minimum inquiries. It's more about cancelling what is for the March and April as well. A lot of people, sort of don't know the details, and it feels like it's just completely all wiped out, the whole Hawke's Bay.
Mohitha Vishwanath is duty manager at Tennyson's Cafe and Bistro.
It is very difficult because before the floods we had ties with a couple of motels across the street, and they used to come here for breakfast using the vouchers and stuff like that. We had a lot of cruise ship tourists coming into the town, and it was really good for the business. But with the floods and after the floods, no tourists, of course. Fair enough, they don't want to come. I don't blame them.
She's hoping the return of cruise ships will give the city a boost. Chief Executive of Hawke's Bay Tourism is Hamish Saxton. He says re-establishing transport links is key.
More than 50% of the visitors to Hawke's Bay come in from the north. That includes the road from Gisborne down to Hawke's Bay, and also State Highway 5, that really important link that comes in from Taupo through to Hawke's Bay as well.
As is government support.
Wage subsidies, business support are going to be of such vital importance to just keep these businesses going until we've got a good recovery and return of visitors to the region once more.
Meanwhile, Mohitha Vishwanath reckons the bottom line will look after itself.
I don't know, just be safe. I just can't say anything about the business because I just want everyone to be safe, and that's one way to get things back to normal, and things will come together.
Waka Kotahi is still unable to give a definitive timeline for when State Highway 5 to Taupo or State Highway 2 to Wairoa will reopen.
It is 20 minutes to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Hey, or Whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. If you're involved in insurance claims around the cyclone, how's that going? How is your company treating you? Love to hear from you. And also let us know what you think of this donation drive the Prime Minister has announced it this afternoon to get a recovery fund going, appealing to people to give donations. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Anea Evie Mina Pitipiti Kōrero. Here's Evie with the headlines.
Kia ora, Lisa. 5 people remain uncontactable after Cyclone Gabrielle, though the police say they're likely avoiding authorities on purpose. Of the outstanding group, 3 face active charges and 2 have arrest warrants, having breached their bail conditions before the cyclone hit. The police say they don't have serious concerns for their welfare. The Far North District is under a severe thunderstorm warning this evening. Met Service says severe thunderstorms have been detected near Mangamuka, Puketsi Forest, the Maunga Tamiwha Range and Okaiho. A severe thunderstorm watch remains in force for Auckland. Hawke's Bay is experiencing a surge in COVID-19 cases, with 435 cases reported in the last week, a spike of about 150 compared to the previous 7 days. The latest COVID-19 figures show 9,100 community cases nationally over the past week and 8 further deaths. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins has paid tribute to the late Chester Borrows, describing him as an honest straight shooter. Mr Borrows, a former National MP and Minister, was diagnosed with cancer last year and died at home in Hawera, South Taranaki. The 65-year-old, a former police officer and lawyer, represented the Whanganui electorate from 2005 until he retired in 2017. And Consumer New Zealand has lodged a complaint with the Commerce Commission against Inter-Islander and Bluebridge for allegedly misleading stranded passengers about their rights. The Watchdog's Chief Executive, John Duffy, says it appears the operators aren't meeting Consumer Guarantees Act obligations. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in the South Island, at Longbush, State Highway 1 in Southland has closed because of a crash between Kennington Road and Longbush South Road. Moving up the country, State Highway 35, they've extended that closure on State Highway 35 and it's now in place between Tolaga Bay and Ruatoria. That's because of heavy rainfall. And State Highway 2, Napier Hawke's Bay, there's a lot of congestion between Miani Road and Omahu Road, so expect delays there, unfortunately. Our next news and weather is at 6 o'clock.
Thank you, Evie. Let's get to some of your feedback now on our earlier interview with a homeowner in Middleway who has a house. The house is fine, but there is major landslips on either side, unstable conditions there, and the house has been red stickered. She's wondering where she's placed with insurance and has been told, she says, that because the house hasn't been damaged, there's no loss to claim on that property. A listener has got in touch saying, I live on Motutara Road at Middleway, same story as Jackie. Live just down the road. About 200 houses are facing the same deal. Yeah, interesting. Let us know if you're in the same position too. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. And what is your insurance company saying about that? On the issue of funding the cyclone recovery, one listener says the hat needs to be handed around. Where else can we get the dollars? Fair enough. Another says, I can't believe the government is encouraging people to buy Lotto tickets. Encouraging donations, fine. Encouraging gambling is silly. What a short-sighted idea. And this one, so instead of increasing taxes on the rich, we are reduced to begging. The Labour government should be ashamed of itself, this listener says. 2101 on text. An accommodation service rehoming displaced flood victims estimates right now up to 2,500 whānau need help finding a new roof over their heads, but that number could rise. The government's temporary accommodation service, or TAS, has been extended to cover all cyclone-hit areas and is helping match people up with medium to long-term homes. Its manager for response and recovery, Julia Shanahan, says they're currently moving portable modular homes to Auckland, but may redeploy them to other areas.
The scale is really large, as you can imagine. For example, in Auckland to date, we've had just over 1,000 households register with TAS. Of this, about 600 households have been housed by the temporary accommodation service. So the scale is quite large and impactful across the North Island.
Do you know about the other regions? How many you may be dealing with?
Yes, so we do have a snapshot across the rest of the regions, but primarily we kind of wait until we have people register with temporary accommodation, and obviously the people that have transitioned into our service through the emergency accommodation provided by Civil Defence as well. Just in terms of estimates, we have about 100 households that may need TAS support in Northland. In Tairāwhiti, our early estimates are again between about 100 and 400 households. And in the Hawke's Bay, initial estimates suggest about 560 households may need TAS support, but it could rise to approximately 1,000.
So what are the options then in terms of housing in those areas?
Yeah, well, I guess we take an approach where we think about our immediate needs, our medium and longer term TAS supply solutions. So obviously when an event happens, we're quite heavily reliant on the commercial accommodation, so motels and hotels initially. And as we kind of transition into the more medium to long term, we think about our TAS porta cabin fleet and also build solutions. So it's a multifaceted approach, and we think about those supply options from the immediate need through to the long-term need.
So the Portacom fleet, tell us about that, and have they been dispatched anywhere?
So the porta cabin fleet has been relocated. A lot of our porta cabin fleet were based in the South Island following the Westport floods. And they're currently making their way up to Auckland. So it's been a bit of a journey to get them up to the areas in need. And then from there we work with councils and local authorities to consider the best use of that fleet. So whether it be sitting alongside a person's dwelling placed on private sites, or whether it's better placed in a village kind of formation on a piece of land where we can kind of administer services in a central location.
Will all of those cabins heading to Auckland stay in Auckland, or could some of those go to the regions like Tairāwhiti and Hawke's Bay or Northland?
Yeah, absolutely. They can be dispatched to any region. We have some that are sitting at a central location, so another 10 that won't be making their way to Auckland, where we can dispatch them to other regions such as Hawke's Bay and Tairāwhiti.
Given the numbers that you've got that are going to need houses, and obviously a lot of housing stock in those areas are going to be damaged, is it conceivable that you're going to have to use things like motorhomes, these modular houses, and what else? Can you use Airbnb? I mean, what are you delving into here?
I guess we really think about what best supports the families, and obviously with an event of this scale, nothing's off the table. So we are looking at many different accommodation streams. So as you mentioned, motorhomes, porta cabins, we're looking at build programs, villages to support people for the long term. So many different avenues that we're exploring.
Can we look at a few of those then? Camper vans, how far down that road are you? Have you hired any? Are you speaking to suppliers, or where are you at with camper vans?
We have spoken to some suppliers, but as you can imagine, this is the summer months in New Zealand, so a lot of their fleet have been committed to other to their normal kind of holiday makers, so their normal customer base. We haven't progressed that more than just making some initial inquiries, so we're not that far down the track with camper vans specifically.
And building so-called villages, have you identified land or places where they might go in the affected regions?
That's something that we talk to our government partners about, and also Auckland Council, just to get ideas of where they might best be positioned. So those conversations are ongoing.
You've talked a lot about what's suitable accommodation for medium and long term. So do you regard motel accommodation suitable for a family who may be out of their property for a year waiting for it to be fixed?
No, absolutely not. And I think that's where we kind of think about their immediate needs and that need to provide something that's, warm, dry and safe as an initial step. And then obviously thinking more in the longer term, I guess motels and hotels aren't ideal. Places where there's kitchen facilities or apartments is also something that we're considering. So thinking about those, what's immediately available in Auckland at the moment, with a longer term view of providing things that are more suitable for long-term occupation.
And that's Julia Shanahan. There are currently 6 porta cabins in Auckland ready to be deployed, with a further 17 expected to arrive in March. Now, the Temporary Accommodation Service says it's working closely with Auckland Council to decide where those cabins should be placed. It is 9 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Auckland Transport is asking commuters to be patient and flexible with their working hours as the start to the university year puts an added strain on the transport network. It comes as some roads around the region are still damaged after the anniversary weekend floods and then made worse in the cyclone. Access to some West Auckland communities also remains compromised. While Richard Harrison is Auckland Transport's Manager of Metro Optimisation, and he joins us now. Kia ora, Richard. Can the transport network cope or not?
Kia ora, Lisa. Yes, the transport network can cope, but people will have to be a little bit flexible about how they travel around it. We are entering the busiest time of the year. This is going to be the busiest March for several years. I think we're going to get back to pre-COVID levels.
So tell us about the buses. How many trips are you making in the buses? How does it compare? How many drivers are you short?
So right now we are operating about 85% of the full scheduled service in our buses, and so I've got about 5% of services suspended and another 10% we're having to cancel daily to deal with the driver shortage. The good news is that the driver shortage has reduced since I last spoke to you. Before Christmas we were over 500 drivers short. Right now we're under 400. Operators doing a great job of recruiting and adding new people to the workforce.
But that's a big chunk of your problem right there, isn't it?
That's absolutely the cause of the problem, yes. Like I said before, it's a crisis, the shortage of drivers and ferry crew across the network. We're working hard to bring more people into the industry, and as we do, that's going to allow us to put more service on.
Richard, with respect, it's your agency's job to, promote public transport and deal with these problems, and you've just conceded that your management of it is part of the problem, a significant part of the problem.
We're working hard to solve the problem. That's exactly our job. We're taking responsibility for fixing this, and that's what we're doing.
At the same time, Aucklanders' travel arrangements, they're being warned, could be compromised in March unless they change them considerably.
To be fair, every March is a challenge in Auckland. That's our busiest time of the year. It's when people are returning from Christmas breaks and extended holidays. It's when university is starting, and so we always have a busy time. I think we've forgotten what March is like. We used to have to stand on the bus. We used to have to wait for the next one to come. We're simply getting back to that kind of level. So we think we're doing our part by warning people. We're communicating to Aucklanders that this is what is likely to happen. We need to be realistic about it. And we suggest that people plan ahead, allow more time for travel. And where possible, if it's possible, think about alternative ways in. Travel off-peak if you can, or look at alternate routes if you can.
If you think that the recruiting process is going so well for bus drivers, why do you still not have enough?
Because it's going to take time. There's a large number of people.
How long, Richard? What's the time frame to be back to full capacity for drivers?
Sometime in this year. It depends on the operator. So operators are bringing.
We're only in the first couple of months of the year, so are you suggesting that at the end of the year we could still have this problem?
I don't think we will in bus. No, I think by the middle of the year we'll be looking a lot better in bus. We're getting down to a level where some operators are able to restore full service. Hawick and Eastern out in East Auckland, they've now got the full requirement of their drivers and they've been able to go back to full service.
In terms of asking or urging commuters to be flexible with working hours and don't travel at peak time, have you told your own staff and has Auckland Council told its entire staff to heed that?
We send that message out to our staff, absolutely. We've got a lot of flexibility in Auckland Transport. I myself this morning, I started the day at home with a couple of interviews. I came in later. I'm still at the office now and I'll be heading home shortly after I've spoken to you, so I'll be travelling off-peak.
Appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. That's Richard Harrison from Auckland Transport there. Gloriavale's overseeing shepherd has told the employment court he's saddened people have been harmed at the Christian community and has admitted leaders made mistakes. Howard Temple has been giving evidence in a case brought by 6 women who claim they lived in servitude and are seeking a ruling they were employees rather than volunteers. Jean Edwards reports from Christchurch.
Howard Temple used his rare public appearance to express regret for people suffering at Gloriavale.
I and the other leaders am concerned and saddened that members and former members of our community have experienced harm. That is not what we want for our families.
The 6 women who've brought the case say they were exploited and treated like slaves. Witnesses have also testified about being exposed to workplace sexual harassment and abuse. Mr Temple told the court Gloriavale's leaders naively tried to bring people to a place of repentance and forgiveness.
The wrongdoing in our community is a dark period in our history. I accept that these issues could have and should have been handled differently, handled better. As leaders, we made mistakes and were naive in how we dealt with these issues.
He says abuse must be reported to police and the same mistakes won't be repeated. Howard Temple became the Christian community's overseeing shepherd after the death of its founder, Hopeful Christian. The 82-year-old says his leadership style is more consultative.
Some of the plaintiffs' witnesses are endeavouring to paint me as some sort of unrestricted dictator or tyrant. I am certainly not that. I truly value the input and ideas of others.
The women say they lived under a regime of total control, but Mr Temple says they've confused the concepts of submission and subjugation.
I do not have, nor do I exercise absolute power and control over community members. I have never claimed to have such power, and nor do I want such power.
Witnesses have testified about unwanted attention from Mr Temple, but he says he gave girls hugs or put a comforting arm around their shoulders as a fatherly figure.
It was not my intention to cause harm, and my intentions were certainly not sexual in nature, as is being implied. I never pinched Rosanna Overcomer or indeed anyone else's bottom.
Mr Temple later told the Chief Judge, Christina Ingalls, there's no simple answer to the question of how Gloriavale would manage paying everyone as employees.
I'm having a bit of a problem of just solving that. It's off the top of the head at the present time. Yeah, I was going to say, you might have to give me the solution how all this would work, okay?
Or I might give you the solution.
He told the court employment relationships could foster inequality and disunity.
I can see some real problems there. For a start, we wouldn't be able to pay everybody a minimum wage.
Howard Temple says anyone who selfishly kept earnings to themselves would be in breach of Bible teachings.
Let's get to some of your feedback before the news at 6. This person says, if a family can't legally enter, live safely in or sell the house, it now has no value. This is in respect of cyclone damage and unstable land. Therefore, insurance is owed pronto, this person says. On the subject of the Prime Minister and cyclone funding, they've launched a campaign to get people to donate. This listener says New Zealanders have donated for disaster relief worldwide for many decades. Perhaps it's time for payback. Our household has donated 10k to 5 mayoral funds in affected regions. This disaster could impact any of us in New Zealand, so we challenge others to do the same. On roading, got a report here that the Paparoa route in Northland is in a worse state than Saturday, and logging and other trucks are using it as well as a lot of traffic. And the Brindurans, because there's issues there. Waka kotahi after 6.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening. Ngā mihi o te pō. I'm Evie Ashton. Thunderstorms are rolling across the Upper North Island with a severe thunderstorm warning in place over the same region of the Upper North Island that was hit by torrential rain and flash flooding last Friday. A resident of Puhoi, north of Auckland City, is feeling rattled after rolling thunderclaps boomed over his property north of Auckland this afternoon. Hayden Taylor says he's never experienced a storm like it.
We get some pretty severe thunderstorms up here in Puhoi to the extent where they'll crack straight over the top of the house and shake the house. These ones are quite eerie and quite scary actually, but it's bizarre. It's hard to explain. Ooh, massive lightning strike just then, huge. Here it comes.
And a severe thunderstorm warning has also been issued for an area including Kaipara, Whangarei and Rodney. The thunderstorms are expected to be accompanied by very heavy rain. Met Service meteorologist William Nepe says locals are being urged to take shelter.
Rainfall of these amounts can cause surface and or flash flooding, about streams, gullies, conditions can be hazardous with surface flooding and all those other things happening, like the potential for slips and things of that nature.
William Nepe says some areas could see between 20 and 40 millimetres of rain in an hour. The Prime Minister has launched a Cyclone Gabrielle appeal fund to raise money for communities affected by the storm. The appeal will focus on medium and long-term recovery projects. It'll be modelled on the Christchurch earthquake appeal, which raised more than $94 million following the 2011 earthquake. A special Lotto draw will also take place on March 18th. Meanwhile, the national state of emergency will continue, especially for Hawke's Bay and Tairāwhiti. The Prime Minister, Chris Hipkins, says other regions could be moved to a transition phase in the next few days. 5 people remain uncontactable after Cyclone Gabrielle, although the police say it's likely they're avoiding authorities on purpose. Of the outstanding group, 3 face active charges and 2 have arrest warrants against them for breaching bail conditions prior to the cyclone. Police say they could be avoiding authorities on purpose and there are no serious concerns for their welfare. The online form to report uncontactable people has now been taken down. Instead, people are asked to visit their local police station or call 105 if they have concerns about someone's whereabouts. A Hastings couple are living between caravans after losing their house and belongings in the floods. Flaxmere resident Chance Wharekawa says their house was fully submerged when the cyclone hit, and he and his partner only managed to save a few photos. He says they're currently staying in family and friends' caravans. He says many people in Flaxmere are in the same situation with losing houses, and people are panicked about having nowhere to go.
Especially when we had no power or no service for a good couple of weeks, and during that time there was nothing but panic. Yeah, even to this day there's still, people panicking, but we're slowing down.
Chance Wharekawa says the temporary accommodation service being expanded to include Hawke's Bay will be a huge relief for many people. Met Service believes a tropical cyclone over Vanuatu is unlikely to hit New Zealand. Tropical Cyclone Judy was named by the Fiji Meteorological Service this afternoon. Met Service says it's increasingly confident that Judy will remain far to the northeast with minimal impact. It says this time of year is peak tropical cyclone season. Census Day will go ahead on Tuesday the 7th of March with an extension for areas affected by Cyclone Gabrielle. Cabinet has agreed with the government statistician's recommendation to extend field operations in particularly hard-hit areas. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins says census work in Hawke's Bay, Northland and Tairāwhiti will only be done when it's safe to do so.
We've extended the period for those follow-up activities by a further 8 weeks, allowing for about 2,500 census staff to remain out in the field longer with a particular focus on those most affected regions.
Chris Hipkins says the extension will run from the 6th of April to the 1st of June, with the National Census Day going ahead on the 7th of March. The Prime Minister is paying tribute to the late Chester Borrows, describing him as an honest, straight shooter who he enjoyed working with. Mr Borrows, a former National MP and Minister, has died after battling cancer. The 65-year-old, a former police officer and lawyer, represented the Whanganui electorate from 2005 until he retired in 2017. Chris Hipkins says he was a young MP when he first met Mr Borrows and found him great to work with.
He was someone who I just got on really well with because he was just so sensible and normal. And, he loved his politics the same as the rest of us do, but he also just wanted to get on and get the job done.
Chester Borrows was diagnosed last year with terminal head and neck squamous cell cancer. A train has derailed in Waikato after colliding with a vehicle. Police say there are no major injuries, but part of State Highway 3 has been closed at Gillard Road in Waipa District until the accident site is cleared. The closure is likely to be in place overnight. Consumer New Zealand has lodged a complaint with the Commerce Commission against Inter-Islander and Bluebridge for allegedly misleading stranded passengers about their rights. Thousands of customers have been caught up in cancellations in the last few weeks due to mechanical failures and breakdowns. The Watchdog's Chief Executive, John Duffy, says it appears the operators are failing to meet their obligations under the Consumer Guarantees Act. He says by refusing to refund the cost of accommodation and alternative travel, they're also breaching the Fair Trading Act. And in sport, New Zealand have been dismissed for 483 late on day 4 of the second cricket test in Wellington, leaving England with a target of 258 to win. That's the news.
I'm Catherine Ryan. On 9 to noon tomorrow, new research finds most acute mental health units, which treat 14,000 people a year, languish on the periphery of hospital grounds. What impact is that having on mental and physical recovery? Australia's intelligence chief says the country's being targeted by foreign agents at a higher level than any time in its history. And since 75-year-old Andy Snitsky was diagnosed with blood cancer 25 years ago, he's been riding his bike around the world raising money for research. With me, on 9 to noon on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. Northland, Auckland, Waikato and Waitomo. Fine breaks and scattered showers. Some rain heavy with possible thunderstorms and downpours until tonight. Isolated showers tomorrow, clearing by the evening. For the central high country, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Periods of rain with some heavy falls. Thunderstorms and downpours possible inland until tonight. Rain or showers for Gisborne and Hawke's Bay tomorrow, easing later. Isolated showers elsewhere, clearing tomorrow evening. From Taranaki to Wellington, also for Wairarapa, fine spells. Isolated showers mainly about the ranges, clearing later tomorrow. Thunderstorms and localised downpours possible for northern Manawatu and inland Whanganui today. For the South Island, fine spells. Isolated showers about the ranges, some heavy with possible thunderstorms from Arthur's Pass northwards today. Mostly fine tomorrow, but isolated showers about the ranges during the afternoon and evening. And for Te Kohu, Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy, a few light showers. It's 8 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Nā mihi, Evie. No mai, hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Aotearoa's roads to nowhere. It could be months, if not years, of patch-ups and complete rebuilds before the country's roading network is back on its feet. State Highway 1 through the Brynderwyns is cut off. An alternative route via Mangawhai has been nailed too in recent storms. On State Highway 35, Tokomaru Bay is still cut off by road. And State Highway 25A, a vital route into the Coromandel, will be out of action for at least a year. Waka Kotahi's National Emergency Response Team spokesperson Mark Owen joins me now. Kia ora, Mark. How about we start with the Brynderwyns? Where is that at? How long is it going to take?
Yes, good evening, Lisa. So we've obviously seen a further impact to our road network in the Northland over the weekend. Significant rainfall, particularly around that Mangawhai area. So unfortunately the Brynderwyns has taken another hit. We've had land movement up there. So unfortunately, State Highway 1 is closed. So the detour is out via Dargaville for freight, and there is a local road detour via Paparoa for lighter vehicles.
Yeah, a couple of things there. How long do you think it will be before you get even one lane open through the Brynderwyns?
Well, that's the challenging question, because it really depends on how much rain and when the land can dry out and just ease back a bit. We need to make sure that it can stop moving and it's safe. Our crews will be working hard with advice from geotechnical engineers, and as soon as they feel it's safe, we'll try and at least get one lane open, but it really just depends on that sort of ground being a bit more stable than it is at the moment.
So you've said about a month. You're sticking with that for now?
No, we haven't sort of put any time limit on it. We're certainly trying as hard as we can, but it's days, not it's going to take a few days before they can stabilise it and do the work that's required.
So those alternative routes that you outlined there, freight is supposed to go via Dargaville, right? 12 and 14.
Correct, State Highway 12.
Yeah, and there's a smaller road there that people have got in touch about, the Paparoa route. But trucks, they report trucks on that road. Can it stand up to trucks, and is it going to be kind of enforced to keep them off there?
So that's a local council road, so they would put the restrictions in terms of limiting any freight. Right. So our advice is for freight to keep to the highways they're built to take freight. The local road does have a 70k temporary speed limit on it, and it is only built for light vehicles.
Okay, let's move to the east coast. Hikawai Bridge gone, and a Bailey Bridge is headed in that direction. Where are you at with that?
Yes, and unfortunately the people on the east coast are getting hit with more rain, so we've had a section of 35 now closed further north, so right up to Tiki is closed because of the extra rain they're having at the moment, so real challenging for the people along.
So Mark, do you have another slip? Do you have another slip, or what's happened?
It's just there's been a lot of rain, a lot of debris, a lot of silt. You can imagine with the rain they've had up there, a lot of our drainage facilities have all been blocked, so now we've got more silt on the road, and it's just deemed too dangerous at the moment. We're hoping that'll clear once the rain stops. And then we're back down to our more permanent closure between Tapuia and Tolaga, and that's because north of Coromandel Bay we've had a significant, there's a dam built up at Mangahawini, and the road's been scoured out significantly, and then south of there is the Hikawai Bridge between Coromandel Bay and Tolaga Bay.
So the Hikawai Bridge is the thing that you can sort in the medium term. So is a Bailey Bridge on the way there?
Yes, so our teams are beavering away designing that Bailey Bridge. It obviously is going to take a little bit of time in terms of the prep work that's needed to happen. It's quite likely we've got to put a pier down into the river so we can suspend the Bailey Bridge, and then they can launch it and reconnect that highway. But that is going to take a few weeks in terms of the amount of work that has to happen to secure that route.
So when you say a few weeks, are you talking inside a month or...?
Probably a couple of months. Just depends on how quickly things proceed. Again, it's still subject to that weather, and it's dependent upon sort of access in there. But our teams are experienced. They know that what they need to do to install these type of Bailey bridges and bolt them together. It's just making sure that we've got the ground conditions on either side to make it secure and safe.
State Highway 5, Taupo to the Hawke's Bay. What is the status of that road? Who should be using it at the moment?
Again, so crews have been working really hard from both ends. I mean, obviously the Eastdale end, I'm sure people have seen the significant damage along there. We had the approach to one of the bridges washed out, so they're working hard to restore that. Lots of dropout and damage right along that highway. So we're hoping we'll have an update later this week. And what we're hoping to do is get one lane open for essential freight, and that then hopefully can secure freight getting between Napier and Taupo. And then as more work is done to make that road more safe, then we'll be looking at opening to the public later down the track.
So at the moment, is it just a lifeline route and for residents only?
Absolutely. I mean, it's been worked on significantly by a number of contractors at a number of sites along there. And with that bridge approach washed out until that's fixed, it's unsafe for the public to use it. But as soon as we think we can get it open, it'll be controlled with convoys of essential freight only. Until such time as we deem it safe to then start to allow the public through. And we just want to flag that even though when it will eventually open, it'll still have a lot of one-lane sections, temporary speed limits, just due to the devastation of damage that's happened along that corridor.
Sorry to ask this question again, Mark, but you know it's the one that people will want to know. So opening it up, even with one lane and stop-go and all the rest of it, for the general public, what is your goal and timeline for that?
Really subject to how quickly the crews that are in there can get it safe. As I said, we're hoping that within the next week we hope to open it to essential service for freight. So that's what our target is, but it's very hard to put a timeline because it's subject to more weather that may be forecast and making sure that it is safe for the public. So it's almost a daily thing at the moment. We're reviewing it as they make progress, and as soon as we know more, we'll make the announcement to let people know when it was likely to open.
Have you got all the people you need and all the expertise? Because, I mean, you've basically got... road dramas dotted all over the mid to upper North Island that are going to take a lot of resources.
That's right. So it's having a big impact, but our teams that are doing this do have resources they can bring in from around the country. A lot of this is just really access. It's obviously a lot of these roads is only sort of one or two roads in and out. It needs to be done in a coordinated way. So we've certainly got enough resources for now. But given the widespread area, the amount of damage that needs to be fixed up, some of these routes that have been really hit, for example, between Napier and Wairoa, significant damage in there, so it is going to take some time before we can restore it back to a key lifeline link.
Are you going to need overseas expertise or workers?
If we deem that necessary, but I mean, I think we've had a lot of experience with these sort of events in New Zealand, so we've got the expertise locally, but if we decide we do need overseas expertise, I'm sure we'll be able to call on them if we need to.
Thank you for your time, Mark. That's Mark Owen, who's from Waka Kotahi. A small business owner in the Coromandel says the peninsula may lose another summer's trade by the time a major road is fixed. State Highway 25A closed in January after the formation of deep cracks, slips and flooding damage from ex-cyclone hail. Waka Kotahi estimates it'll take 9 months to a year to fix. Haisa Almeida has more.
Carol Williams and her husband have owned a small motor lodge in the Thames Coromandel town of Pauanui since 2019.
Summer season was just chaotic. You know, we just had so many visitors. We had bus tours and locals coming down that day. You know, it was super, super busy.
She says it's been a battle since COVID.
After COVID, we worked through some plans just to try and, get people in here. It's been a long road trying to get business up and going again.
Carol was excited to see new summer bookings, but then storms and flooding caused critical damage to State Highway 25A. the main route to Coromandel.
With the road closures and having no power for nearly 4 days, we're getting a lot of cancellations because people are too weary about travelling here and scared of getting stuck here. So financially, it's hitting us again.
Murray Bang from Kupu-based Coastal Bins knows the limitations of the roads around the Coromandel only too well. He spends a lot of his time now in his depot, trying to keep track of trucks and monitoring how they are going to get them home.
From what you see when you go around, the crews have done a good job in opening up the road and they've cleared the road to get the traffic through. But when you look up the banks, there's still a lot of debris they obviously haven't got time to get to yet, that they'll have to get back to. But, you know, more rain's going to bring more stuff down. So, you know, the roads are pretty vulnerable at the moment.
Geotechnical assessments are underway on State Highway 25A, but the road might not be open in time for next summer. The Thames Business Association says since last year, some members are down 30% due to the lack of tourists. Chief Executive Sue Lewis O'Halloran says after 3 tough years, businesses are in danger of being overwhelmed.
We're known as a very resilient business community. However, I think everybody's kind of reached that tipping point because we've had 5 weather events since November 2022. I am hopeful that there will be some financial support to help those businesses that are basically hanging on by their fingernails.
She says many are struggling to keep their doors open.
We need to know what the timelines are so that our businesses can be as resilient and productive through that time and, you know, hopefully survive through these difficult months ahead.
Waka Kotahi says getting geotechnicians to assess the damage will be weather dependent. It might take weeks due to the risk of more slips in the area. Its regional manager of infrastructure delivery, Joe Wilton, says it's too early to say if the highway will be fully open next summer. Meanwhile, for Carol Williams, fixing the road means getting her life back together.
I hope that our business stays open because any little bit of rain now, and I just seem to get really, really anxious. I think they should be starting now on getting that sorted for us because I'm tired and exhausted just from trying to cope.
Waka Kotahi says there are 3 main options for reinstating this highway: building a bridge to replace the lost section of the road, bypassing the slip, or building a retaining wall and redoing the road from the ground up.
It's 19 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. At least 59 migrants, including 12 children, have drowned after their boat broke apart in rough seas off the coast of southern Italy. It's thought it left Izmir in eastern Turkey 3 days ago. 80 people survived and a major search and rescue operation is underway. Bodies have been recovered from a beach at a nearby seaside resort. The BBC's John Donaldson has the latest.
Overnight, another tragedy in the Mediterranean. Rescue workers struggled in the conditions to recover bodies from the water. It's thought around 150 people were on board. Dozens, including a baby, are known to have drowned. The regional governor visited the scene.
Calabria is a region that welcomes people. Last year we welcomed 18,000 migrants, but we can't be abandoned by the rest of Europe. This type of tragedy should have been avoided, not lived how we're having to live it today and how we will live it again in the future.
And reacting to today's loss of life, the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said altogether EU countries must redouble their efforts to tackle the migration crisis in the central Mediterranean. Around 80 people were brought ashore alive, among them migrants from Iran, Pakistan and Afghanistan. Despite the dangers, Italy is one of the main landing points for people trying to reach Europe in small boats. Almost 12,000 migrants have already arrived by sea in Italy this year. In 2022, more than 105,000 successfully made the crossing, with over 1,300 dead or missing. Although high, those numbers are way down on the 2016 peak, when there were over 180,000 arrivals by sea. The government blames people traffickers and has pledged to stop the boats. At the Vatican, Pope Francis expressed his sorrow for the latest loss of lives, which he said included many children. He said he was praying for the dead, the missing, and those who survived. And those survivors, like hundreds of thousands before them, face an uncertain future. Under the white sheets behind them, those who didn't make it.
The number of eating disorder cases in Australia has exploded, but the health system is underprepared to deal with the crisis. More than 1 million Australians had an eating disorder before the pandemic, and some major hospitals have reported an 80 to 100% increase in children presenting with anorexia nervosa, one of the deadliest of all mental illnesses. The ABC's Grace Tobin has the details.
It's breakfast time in Sarah Hearn's home in regional Victoria. Her mother Jenny is supervising her while she eats.
Yeah, I need to sit with her, otherwise she'll have trouble eating her breakfast if I'm not with her.
The 23-year-old has anorexia nervosa, a potentially fatal mental illness characterised by an intense fear of food.
I know it's hard to try and eat the rest.
No, I said no.
I know, but eat some more.
No.
Sarah's been rapidly losing weight since she was discharged from hospital last month.
There's obviously something going on in your head that makes it really difficult. What is that? All the thoughts that I have that, like, I don't deserve to eat, that I'm too fat, that I'm out of control.
Sarah is falling through a gap in Australia's health system. She isn't considered sick enough for hospital. At the same time, she can't get into the country's only live-in treatment program. Even if she did, it could cost her up to $73,000 for a 2-month stay.
I just feel like there's nowhere else to turn now. Like, it feels like no one cares. So why should I care?
Her long-term clinical psychologist, Dr. Lindsay Atkins, says Sarah could die if she doesn't receive proper care soon.
This is awful. You've got a young adult who wants treatment, who can't access treatment. Like, where does this exist in another serious illness?
Since the pandemic, some major hospitals have recorded an 80 to 100% increase in children presenting with anorexia nervosa. In Melbourne, Deanna Cohen's 11-year-old daughter was diagnosed with the illness a year ago. She's already been admitted 20 times.
When she's terrified about food or if she's stopped from exercising, she can turn absolutely demonic. And it's really scary. It's just a side of her that we never saw until she developed an eating disorder.
Do you recognise your daughter in those moments?
No, it's like it's as if an alien has come and replaced my daughter, honestly, at those times.
An investigation by Four Corners has found the system is underprepared to deal with the spike in cases. There are only 43 public hospital beds dedicated to treating eating disorders across the country. Some states and territories have none at all. Federal Health Minister Mark Butler admits the whole system is falling short.
I think crisis is the only word you can use. We clearly need more capacity in the system.
The previous coalition government allocated $56 million to build 6 more residential centres, but none of them are even close to opening.
I think it is time that we got some clearer commitments about when those centres would be completed, which is why I've written to health ministers to try to get some clarity around that.
A new national strategy on eating disorders is being released in August.
Sheffield will be the latest city in the UK to introduce a clean air zone in the city, charging drivers of the most polluting vehicles. The BBC's Dan Johnson has more.
What better way to flag that an agreement with the EU is coming closer? The EU Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, will...
No to clean air zones, no to extortionate charges for driving in our own city.
There's a new battle zone in the fight for clean air. Sheffield's seen opposition. And today, there was another protest in Cambridge against plans to charge drivers as clean air zones hit more streets across the country.
My wife works, my wife commutes, 2 different cars, 2 different locations, so it's £5 a day for every working day, and that's a lot.
It's a very poor way to be thinking of how to improve any problems that there are with transportation in Cambridge.
Charging the most polluting vehicles is supposed to get them off the road, but cities have got different prices covering different classes of vehicle, and if you get it wrong, you get fined.
Bristol's scheme started just before Christmas.
I think everyone in Bristol agrees that we all have a bad cough that lingers, and I think the air quality is terrible. Anything we can do to improve it, I fully support.
I'm not really seeing a difference. Are my lungs better? No, they're the same as they were last year as well. So,
as a cyclist, it hasn't made the roads any quieter.
Well, it's to stop people coming into the city, but it's also to make money, I think.
It's good because we're trying to keep the planet a bit healthier, you know, we want a healthier air, just clean air. It's good for everyone.
Bath started charging commercial vehicles 2 years ago, but some feel that's moved traffic and emissions onto Wiltshire's roads.
We've seen significant increases in terms of heavy goods vehicles coming through the middle of Westbury. We're here on a street where the trucks are going, what, 1.5 metres from people's front doors. So we've taken an air quality problem in Bath and simply transposed it to the middle of an area where it's going to create a worse air quality problem.
Birmingham's zone generated £37 million in fines over the last 18 months.
Nationally, poor air quality causes something like 36,000 excess deaths each year.
But evidence shows it is cutting emissions.
Finally tonight to the US, where a celebrity is making waves at a West Virginia library. Librarian Laura Buchanan has introduced a very special little lady who inspires learning at the Princeton Public Library. Reporter Taylor Hankins went to meet Shelley.
It's Library Lovers Month, and we decided to profile someone who loves the library so much she lives here. Meet Shelley the Turtle.
Last summer, the summer reading program was under the sea. Around that same time, Snook's Wings and Things opened. So some of the staff went by, and knowing that I am a turtle lover, they were sending pictures of these adorable little baby turtles.
After some initial hesitancy, Buchanan adopted Shelley and brought her to her new home, the Princeton Public Library.
The first time they put the sweater on, I'm going, this is incredible. I didn't know that. She has her carrying case, her toys that she gets, and she's every bit as entertaining as most dogs.
Shelley's big personality has inspired her own merchandise.
The youth service coordinator designed Shelley shirts, and over Christmas we did our cups. We have buttons of various styles. The buttons we sell for 50 cents along with Shelley stickers.
The proceeds from the buttons and stickers go to Shelley's upkeep. The red-footed tortoise also inspires learning.
And we also ordered a couple of nonfiction books specifically about her species, so people, if they were curious, they could read up more on them.
The kids enjoy her, and they realize that there's so many fun things here at the library.
If you'd like to meet Shelley,
she's always here. Just come by, ask. We're happy to get her out.
Nearly 100 people have stopped by and asked about Shelley just this month. You can also follow Shelley's Instagram. Her username is m.shelleytheturtle. And by the way, technically she is not a turtle because she isn't amphibious. But regardless, the tortoise is making quite the impression at the library and on social media.
That is awesome, and all we've got time for. Don't forget to tune in for First Up tomorrow starting at 5 a.m. They speak to another red-stickered Muriwai resident in limbo. Have a great evening. We'll catch you tomorrow too.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Good evening, I'm Evie Ashton. Some areas of the far north could see between 20 and 40 millimetres of rain in an hour this evening. A severe thunderstorm warning has been issued for Kaipara, Whangarei and Rodney. Auckland remains under a severe thunderstorm watch. The government has announced a special fundraising appeal to support Cyclone Gabrielle recovery efforts. A separate Lotto draw will be held on March the 18th. The number of uncontactable people since Cyclone Gabrielle has increased to 5, but police say they're likely avoiding authorities on purpose. And a collision between a vehicle and a freight train in Waikato has closed State Highway 3 to Gillard Road in Waipa District. Police say a train has derailed. There are no major injuries. Those are the headlines.